All right, good morning everyone. Welcome to Monday. It's a beautiful day here in Vancouver. Spring is in the process of springing. Look at those leaves almost on the trees. Beautiful. Michelle is here. Good morning, Michelle. And Irene is here. Good morning, Irene. Quick reminder that it's going to be a short week for us. We'll have class Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Thursday we'll have our quiz that we arranged beforehand, and I've put a little summary of that information in Microsoft Teams, so you can look at that. And then Friday is Good Friday, so we will not have class. So it's a nice short week, nice and easy. Okay, so on Thursday. On Thursday, we had basically come to the end of the Republic, right? And we were talking about right after the death of Julius Caesar, we had this guy show up on the scene, right? And this kid, Gaius Octavius, who happens to be Caesar's grandnephew. I'm not really sure even how, do you know how that is? Like, do you know what a grandnephew is? I know a nephew, but it's like, is it the son of your nephew? Is that a grandnephew? I'm not sure. I don't know how these things work. In Western culture, we kind of, we have the nuclear family, and then we don't pay too much attention to other connections. So we kind of know like grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles, but further than that, we tend not to really know who those people are. So I don't know who a grandnephew is, but the Romans pay attention to it because Julius Caesar nominates this kid as his heir, right? And so he leaves Gaius Octavius a bunch of money, he leaves him some property, and maybe most importantly, or at least equally as importantly, leaves him his name, because the name Julius Caesar is an established name in Rome, right? And so Octavius here, as he'll be portrayed this way a little bit later on. This is kind of Augustus, but at the time he's kind of just a young kid, right? And so he, when Caesar dies in 44 BC, Octavius is just a kid. Well, he's not really a kid, but he's 19 years old. He adds Julius Caesar to his name, and he allies with Mark Antony, who was kind of an associate and friend of Julius Caesar, and this other guy, Lepidus. They form a second triumvirate, a second alliance of three, and they run around and chase down all of Caesar's murderers, right? Good morning. All of Caesar's murderers. And so this second triumvirate defeats all of those senators, those optimates as they were called, and then eventually they kind of turn on each other. And so they're able to kind of push Lepidus out of the way. Antony and Octavian go to war with each other. Octavian wins, but Mark Antony and his Egyptian girlfriend Cleopatra commit suicide before Octavian can capture them. And that leaves Octavian as the last man standing, right? And we made kind of a comparison to Julius Caesar, right? So Julius Caesar went to war with Pompey, and interestingly, Pompey fled to Egypt as well, right? But Pompey was assassinated by one of the Ptolemies. But Octavian here has a similar problem. Comes back to Rome, last man standing, most powerful person in Rome, but what does he do, right? He can't be a king. The Romans will not accept a king. But if he just remains a general, there will always be other generals challenging him, and it'll just be a constant state of civil war. And if you think back, it's the exact same problem that Cleisthenes had in ancient Athens in about, when was that? Around 500 BC, I believe. Cleisthenes had the same problem, right? If I give the power to a single ruler, to a tyrant, sometimes the tyrants are good and sometimes they're awful. We don't want that. But if I allow an oligarchy, the nobles will continue to fight for power, just like the Roman generals will continue to fight for power as well. And so it's almost like this same question keeps coming up, right? How do we govern? And so Cleisthenes, of course, created a democracy. Julius Caesar tried to have himself appointed dictator perpetuo, right, in perpetuity, forever, which technically worked until he was assassinated. But Augustus is in the same, or Octavian is in the same position, right? What to do, right? The republic doesn't work. He can't be a king. How are we going to run this empire now? And so we said he goes back to the Senate, and I'm not sure if he cleverly does this or if he just did it and it worked out in his favor, but he went and said, I've restored the republic. It's now your job to keep it, right? And the senators say, no, don't run off, Octavian. Here, we'll grant you all of these titles, right? So they make him Princeps Civitatis, the first person of the state. They give him this name Augustus, right, which is the chosen of the gods, or the blessed by the gods. I forget what the translation is exactly. And then they give him a bunch of special powers, right? And so they give him a new title. They call him Imperator Caesar Divi Filius Augustus, right? Commander Caesar, son of the deified one. What does it mean to be deified?
Is it similar to being insane?
Nope. Not similar to being insane. Nope. Being a deity. Yeah, being a deity. Yeah, it's same root word, right? So, yeah, you are you are made a god, right? So we said after Caesar's murdered, a bunch of temples go up to worship Julius Caesar as a divine being, and so Augustus here is given this title, Imperator Caesar Divi Filius Augustus, right? Commander Caesar, son of the deified one. And so this is kind of where the word I mentioned, this is where the word emperor comes from, right? Imperator, commander. And it's kind of a military term at the time, but it will eventually evolve into the title of emperor that we know. But as I say, keep in mind that there is no emperor, right? So Augustus is kind of seen as Rome's first emperor, but there's no office, right? There's no role of emperor. There's just this guy who has a bunch of titles and a bunch of special powers, right? And so, my head's in the way again. There we go. So he has a bunch of special powers, right? We said he had the power of tribune. He controlled the treasury. The army had sworn allegiance to him. And again, he was the first person of the Senate, right? So he was the most prominent, most authoritative member of the Senate. But again, not an emperor, not a king, kind of a figurehead, right? And again, I'd like to make sort of a modern world comparison to who Augustus is, but I'm not sure that I can think of one. I can't think of someone who, is held up with such high regard, right? Someone who the country or the state, all the people kind of look up to and love, but who also has a bunch of very significant powers as well, and yet has no real, he has no real position. I don't think there's a modern analog for that, as far as I'm aware. And so he either does something very clever here at the end of the Republic, or he kind of flukes his way into it. I'm not really sure if he, had this planned all along, or if it just kind of unfolded in a way that worked out. But either way, this is kind of what happens. And so Augustus here, it's hard to know what he's doing, right? Is he a dictator who wants sole control but knows he can't get that, and so he does it in this kind of sneaky, kind of backdoor kind of way? Or is he someone who wants to restore the Republic, but this is the way he comes up with, right? He's kind of a balancing influence. He makes himself head of the military, so there's no, generals with loyal armies behind them anymore. That's over. The rest of the Republic machinery continues to operate. Augustus kind of balances it out, right? And it kind of works, right? And so, again, during this Augustan period, and he's in this position for a few decades, I think for about 40 years or so. For the Romans, it's a period of peace, right? It's been insanity for probably a couple of hundred years at least, right? With, Marius and Sulla and the Gracchi, right, who both were murdered or committed suicide. Sulla, Pompey, Caesar, Crassus, right? All of those guys were corrupt with big armies behind them, fighting civil wars with each other, using Rome for their own greedy purposes. The empire was kind of expanding at an uncontrollable rate because people were just taking stuff over to get rich. Finally, there's some peace, right? It's like, oh God, we'll take a breath, right? Everything calms down. There's no more civil wars. The empire stops expanding. Everyone can kind of take a bit of a breath, right? So again, I don't know how you want to see Augustus here. Is he a political genius, or does he kind of fluke his way into this? Is he a power-hungry dictator who just finds a sneaky way to do it, or is he trying to balance the Republic out? I mean, I don't think it's entirely clear what he was trying to do, but he kind of did both of those things, right? He gained almost full control of the Roman Empire, but he also did it in kind of a clever, sneaky way. And so I'm not really sure how to think of him. But it's probably fair to say that the life of the average Roman probably improved under Augustus. He was a good administrator, and he did try to return Rome to a bit of a golden age. Okay, and so let me just go back here a little bit. When we read that section of the textbook, I'm just going to put myself back up here. There we go. When we read that section of the textbook, we read about some prominent poets like Ovid and Virgil, and who else am I missing? Ovid and Virgil. And those writers were writing about kind of a return to traditional Roman values, because Augustus thought that, Rome had kind of lost its way. It had kind of forgotten its morality and its values. And that was true, right? They had. And we heard about it, I think I mentioned it a little bit early on, but we had that origin story for Rome with the two brothers raised by the wolf, and one brother kills the other. Brutal, right? At this time, in the early Augustan period, we see, and I think it's Virgil writes down the Aeneid. And so this is the myth or the story of Aeneas. And Aeneas is a member, he's a member of the Greek army in the Trojan War. He goes to Troy to lay siege to it with Odysseus and Achilles, and just like in the Iliad, the classic Greek book. And then Aeneas comes home, right? And I think we heard in a video that he has a little romantic thing with the Queen of Carthage, right, with Dido. And then he sails home to found Rome, right? So they kind of create, in this period, they kind of create a new origin story, right? Because that original origin story is brutal, right, and awful, and in a way very reflective of how the Republic ends, right? The Republic Rome starts with brother killing brother, and basically that's what we have at the end of the Republic. We have Romans going to civil war against other Romans, and generals of the Republic fighting with each other, marching on the city itself, right? What is that if not brother killing brother, right? So here in this new period, Augustus is supporting the arts, and he's like, let's try to reimagine what Rome is, right? Let's try to reimagine our values and our beliefs. And so the Aeneid, that story of Aeneas, is much more heroic, and it's much more of a normal origin story for a city, right? A hero comes back from a great war. He is tempted, woman as temptress, right? He's tempted by the queen of Carthage, by Dido, but even though he loves her, he knows that his duty is to his home, and he goes home to found Rome, right? Much more heroic, much less violent, right? Much less murder and rape like the first one. So yeah, it's a better story. And you see this happening with Augustus. We won't have a ton of time to deal with it, but Augustus supports the arts in this way. He supports a return to like a higher moral code, right? One that's more where you hold to your beliefs and your values a little tighter. So he does take control, but he does do a lot of good things, right? A lot of money goes into public works, a lot of money into the arts. The quality of life of Romans improves. He's trying to sort of reestablish morality in this kind of amoral period of history, and so he tries to do a lot of good things. I would think, for the time anyway. Let me just see where we are here. Right. So yeah, I kind of jokingly gave you this guide to becoming an emperor, but it worked. It worked for Augustus, right? He gained a loyal army. He went to Caesar's army and said, hey, I'm the heir of Julius Caesar, and I'll give you whatever Caesar was promising you. He killed all of his rivals and made money while doing it. He tried to give up his power to the Senate, but the Senate refused, right? The Senate tried to keep him in power anyway. He gained public favor, which he did, right? He made himself kind of a father of the nation, right? So think back to Ashoka, right? Ashoka in India tried to position himself as the father of the nation, right? And here he kind of does the same thing, right? He's the patron of the nation, a person everyone looks up to. He acquires numerous special powers, right? Powers that no one person has in Rome. But again, he holds no office, right? He's simply princeps civitatis, the first person of the state, the role model for the state, if you will. Yeah, so we watched that video kind of questioning who he was, and I think, to be honest, I think the jury is still out on just what he was, right? Again, power-hungry dictator, just controlling the republic like a puppeteer behind the strings, or someone who found a way to sort of bring balance and order to the republic and allow it to continue to operate mostly as it was supposed to. It's tough to know. It's tough to know. After this, there's a long series of emperors. And so that position of emperor will become kind of a permanent thing. With Augustus, it's kind of it's sort of situational. It just kind of appears. But later on, the role of emperor will become a little more solidified, and people will actually hold that office. As you can see, there's quite a few emperors that come after Augustus. There's Augustus, the first one. Obviously we don't have time to deal with all of these guys. They're a real mixed bag, okay? Some of them are excellent, strong, competent, reasonable administrators. Some of them are not so great. Some of them are complete disasters and, like full-on sociopaths. It's a real, yeah. You get some great emperors, and then you get some that are just, unbelievably terrible. Some of them look kind of weird. No, the Roman emperors were not necessarily they weren't necessarily dynastic, and so some of them were tried to put their son into that position, but most of them kind of found a successor somewhere else, someone who wasn't related to them. So for instance, Augustus had no legitimate children, and so he finds Tiberius, and I think Tiberius might be his grandnephew as well, strangely enough. But so Tiberius is kind of a loose relation to Augustus, but he kind of chooses him and grooms him to take over. And so he kind of, once he identifies Tiberius as a successor, he kind of starts bringing Tiberius to meetings and things like that. Slowly, he kind of transfers his power over to Tiberius, and he actually manages to do it. And so Tiberius is able to just kind of pick up where Augustus leaves off and continue to rule in this way. Tiberius, I think, as far as I know, was an okay emperor. I don't think he really wanted to be one, and he didn't really enjoy it that much, but I think he did a reasonably credible job. The one after him, I think that's Caligula. Is that what it says? Yeah, Caligula. Caligula is horrible. He's a full-on, sociopathic sex monster. And I think, Caligula is... Claudius and Nero are kind of also morally questionable. Vespasian, let me see. These are all good emperors here, if I recall. Trajan, Hadrian, Antonius Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. All of those wind up being good emperors, but then you wind up with Commodus there. If you've ever seen that movie Gladiator with Russell Crowe, that takes place right between the two of them. So at the beginning of that movie, Marcus Aurelius will die, and then Commodus will take power. Let me see here. How do you pronounce that again? Elagabalus. He was a very strange emperor. I think he may have been. I don't really know. Lots of strange things happening with him. Here we have two emperors at the same time. Valerian. Yeah, they're a real mixed bag, right? Again, some of them great, some of them meh, some of them full on the worst person you can possibly imagine. Sometimes the transfer of power is clean. Sometimes people get assassinated, and in some cases the army manages to put an emperor in power, and so again, it works well with Augustus. It works well with Tiberius. After that, kind of depends. Some of them are great, some of them are awful. Now, we don't have time to deal with all of these guys, of course, but I do want to sort of skip ahead a bit to there we go, hang on. I do want to skip ahead a bit, and what's going to happen eventually, this is a bit of a spoiler, but what's going to happen eventually is that the empire will be too big, okay? The empire will be too big. Again, this is a period in history where if you want to communicate with people, you have to send a letter, right? And letters travel by foot or by horse or by ship. And so communication takes a long time. It's difficult to coordinate different parts of the empire. And so Domitian, let me just see if I can actually find Domitian here. Where's Domitian? You see him? Diocletian. Oh no, he's probably on the one before that because there's Constantine. Oh, there he is. Domitian. So He's from about 81 to 95 AD. And so he's actually going to split the empire in half. And so with the Emperor Domitian, there'll be a Western Empire and an Eastern Empire. And so there'll be a capital at Rome, as there always was for the Western Empire. And in the Eastern Empire, it'll be at a city that's originally called Byzantium. It's a Greek name because I think it starts out as a Greek colony. So if you remember back in our ancient Greece, there was a bunch of Greek city-states that set up around the Mediterranean, and Byzantium is one of them. It'll be renamed Constantinople by Constantine, who will be a later emperor. But the empire will be split. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. They'll split it in half. And so for a little while, you'll almost have two emperors, right? You'll have one in the east and one in the west. But what I wanted to sort of talk about here today is a little bit about Christianity, because we said that the Roman world had a lot of influence on the Western world, right? There were ideas that came from ancient Greece. They were filtered through and elaborated by Rome. They were kind of rediscovered during the Renaissance. Those ideas were picked up during the Enlightenment and the French Revolution and all that stuff. And those ideas kind of found their way into what is modern Western culture. So here in the West, we kind of owe a lot to the Romans and to the Greeks because we kind of inherited or stole a lot of their ideas. But the other thing to come out of this period of history is a major world religion, right? And so we've talked about Hinduism, we've talked about Buddhism, but here Christianity is worth talking about as well, because again, it's a major world religion. Millions and millions of people belong to this faith, and it comes out of this period, and it comes out of the Roman Empire. And arguably, without the Roman Empire, Christianity might not be a big religion. It might be, a tiny little religion that nobody had ever heard of. And so it's kind of worth paying attention to this, I think, a little bit. So again, I have a very quick section of the text for you to read, and then I have some video for you to watch. But let's do the reading first, just a few pages, and then just two questions for you. Primary sources about the Christians and what's revolutionary about early Christianity. Okay? All right, let's read this. I'll just put some time on the clock here, and then we can talk about these. Okay, people, can we talk about these two really quickly? So, yeah, this talks about kind of the beginning of Christianity, right? And if you know anything about this, you know that the whole thing starts with Jesus of Nazareth, who, you know, depending on your religious beliefs, is either the Son of God or simply a preacher who shows up in what's now Israel, preaches to a bunch of people and kind of starts a small group of believers. And so after he's crucified in, I think roughly about 36 AD, don't quote me on that, after he's crucified by the Romans, his followers continue to spread his message, right? And Paul is one of those. Paul is a disciple or an apostle or a follower of Jesus, and he sets out throughout the Greek-speaking world spreading that message. And so if you are Christian or if you've been to Christian masses, you've probably heard letters from Paul, because Paul wrote lots of things down and sent these letters to people in Greek-speaking cities. And so you've got lots of letters from Paul to the Corinthians, the people in Corinth, or the Ephesians, people in Ephesus, or all kinds of different cities. So I guess that's one source, right? Our letters from Paul. But what other sources do we have about early Christians? Right. So we have the passion of the saints. Let me just see where that is. Where is that, by the way, Mulder? 255? Oh yeah, Perpetua and Felicity. Yeah, so we've got a record of these two women, right, who were martyred. What does it mean to be martyred? Yeah, to be sacrificed or to die in the name of God, or to maybe more generally just to die in the name of your beliefs or your faith, right? So people, lots of these early Christians are martyred. They are executed or put to death because of their belief, but we'll get to that a little bit later. So yeah, we've got these writings, right, that's based on the diary of Perpetua, I think. We've got the letters from Paul. What else do we have? What other sources do we have for Christians in this era? What's that? Oh, Pliny, the the Roman historian Pliny writes about them. So we have kind of an outside source because Pliny wasn't a Christian; he was a Roman, but he wrote about the Christians. So we have evidence from the outside and we have evidence from the inside. And what do we have? We have the four. Yeah, and we have the four Gospels as well, right? Which tell kind of the life story of Jesus. They are mostly the same with some varying details, and some Gospels have events that other ones don't, but they're basically the same story of kind of the life of Jesus, right? So we have some of these early church writings, these early writings on Christianity, but we also have stuff from the outside, right? What the Romans thought about these Christians who show up. What's the big deal, right? Like, why is Christianity so different from what the Romans believe at that time? They were.
Because their God is perfect.
Yeah, right. The Christian God is kind of seen as this perfect being, right? We said that the Roman gods and the Greek gods that they're kind of based on are kind of very imperfect beings, right? They're jealous, they're angry, they punish humans. Sometimes they seduce them and have illegitimate children with them. Some gods cheat on their wives, and the gods are kind of like human beings, just way more powerful, right? But here we have this God who is kind of seen as perfect, right? All powerful, all loving, all things, right? It's a very different idea. What else is there? It's different for the Romans. Yeah, so Roman society is very stratified, right? It's very hierarchical. Some people have a lot of power and prestige and money, and other people have none of those things at all, right? But and Roman religion treats people differently based on their station in life. But here, Christianity is different because their God doesn't care about any of that stuff, right? Their God sees people as equal. Right? Doesn't matter how rich or powerful you are. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. People are people, right? So that's very different as well. What else? What else is different about these early Christians? Yeah, that equality kind of extends to women, right? And women in Rome would have had less power, less authority, and they would have been, very much under the control of either their fathers or their husbands. But here we see women who are reasonably independent, who are seen as equal, who are allowed to hold major roles within the church, and who are kind of respected as heroes, right? I think if you look back in Roman writing, you won't find a lot of female heroes, right? Not in the way that Perpetua and Felicity here are, right? Perpetua and Felicity are two women that disobey their father and their state and die for their beliefs, and in so doing become heroes of the religion, right? I doubt you will find many women heroes in Roman writing, right? I think the only one we've heard of is Lucretia, right? And Lucretia is only a hero because she does what she's told, right? She's very domestic, she's very kind of chaste, she's not a partier like the Etruscan women, she's at home weaving wool, being good, quote unquote, right? And then she's raped and she commits suicide, because of her dishonor. And so that's kind of the only female hero we have that we've encountered in Rome. And I think that kind of hero is very different from the kind of hero that Felicity and Perpetua are. What else is different? What else is different? Yeah, there was that kind of weird thing that happens where God is born into the world as a human, right? And he lives life alongside humans. He mostly acts as a human, even though he performs a few miracles here and there. But he lives his life as a human, and he sacrifices himself, right? He lets humans crucify him and kill him. And so that kind of, the idea that he would sacrifice himself for everyone equally, again, has kind of repercussions for all people being equal, but also that, would a Roman god sacrifice themselves for the sins of the Romans? Unlikely, right? Roman gods don't do that kind of thing, right? They're up there. They're powerful. They're not going to sacrifice themselves because the Romans can't get their stuff together. Come on, right? That's true. I mean, he is, God is an immortal being, so he cannot be killed, right? But still, it's hard to imagine a Roman god doing something similar, right? That would have been a very strange thing. And maybe the last thing, Christianity was, they say it was an apocalyptic religion. What does that mean? What's an apocalyptic religion? What's an apocalypse? No. Do you know what an apocalypse is, or the apocalypse? Yeah, that's the end of the world, right? And so Christianity was apocalyptic, meaning that it preached that the world was going to end, right? And so again, if you know anything about Christianity, the idea is that Jesus or God or whatever will come back at one point, and it will be a judgment day, right? And so everyone will be judged. The good people will go to heaven. The bad people will be sent to hell. The earth will be destroyed, and that will be the end of things, right? And so Christianity preached that, that the world was coming to an end, and the early Christians thought it was coming to an end quite soon. They thought that Jesus would return very, very soon. But of course, the Romans didn't believe that, right? The Romans didn't believe that the world was going to end. They had no such idea in their religion. Also very different from the things that we talked about with the Jains and the Buddhists and the Hindus, right? Where you have a cyclical situation where the world is destroyed and recreated over and over again, right? And souls kind of die and are reborn over and over and over again, right? So that idea of transmigration is kind of cyclical, right? But the Christian view of things is linear, right? There's a beginning, God creates everything, there's life on earth, and then God or Jesus or whoever returns at the end, and end of story, right? That there's a judgment, people go to heaven or to hell, and it's all over, right? So the Christians had a very kind of linear view of how the universe and the world would kind of unfold, but some of those Eastern religions have a cyclical cyclical view, right? So things continue to cycle through over and over again into eternity, right? People like Buddha were trying to figure out how to free themselves from the cycle, right? Christians aren't thinking that because there is no cycle, right? It's a linear view of what's happening. Okay, time for a little break? Yep, okay, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll watch a little something on early Christianity. Okay, so early Christianity, we said, comes out of sort of the mid to latter part of the Roman Empire, I guess. And again, it's worth paying some attention to because it winds up being a major world religion. And as I said, I doubt that it would be if it had not kind of caught on in the Roman Empire. And so if that had not happened, I don't know that Christianity would be a major world religion. It might be, a tiny religion in that part of the world that some people practice, but I don't think it would be as big as it is without Rome. And so I wanted to show you, I guess, just part of this documentary today that talks a little bit about some of the early Christians and some of the sort of interaction between the Christians who were in Rome and the sort of Roman government and the Roman Empire itself. Okay, and so, because again, Christians start out as a very small group within the Roman Empire. There's, at the beginning, there's just a few little churches, small groups of people, and, people like Paul moving around, preaching, setting up churches, writing letters to people. It's a very kind of grassroots thing. It's a very small religion at this time. So I've got questions for you here. Some of them have to do with the Romans, some of them have to do with the Christians. And so here, the Vestal Virgins, I think we heard about them in either the textbook or another documentary that we watched. Who are they and what do they do? How might the Romans have responded to the early Christians and why? We've kind of, one of the reading questions talked about that a little bit, but I'm asking it again here. Why were the Christians initially threatening to the Romans? Okay. Who is Paul? We kind of know who Paul is, but we'll hear about him again. And what was he doing in Rome? There's a big fire in Rome in 64 AD. And so that's going to have some kind of effect on the Christians. You'll hear that. Why did early Christianity attract so many women? You can probably guess the answers to that based on our reading, but you'll hear about it anyway. What brings Christians into contact with Roman religion? We'll hear about that. How does Christianity start to spread up? And so the documentary will talk about, Christianity will start to get a bunch of converts. People will start to convert to the religion, but it will start to move up in that people with power and status will start to convert to Christianity as well. So it spreads this way at first, but then it'll start to spread upwards into Roman society. And then finally, Constantine. Who is he? Why is he significant? Why do we care? Mulder, what's up? No? You had a smile on your face? Does it have anything to do with Christianity or Rome? Okay. All right. So for online people, we'll watch, let's say we'll just watch the first 10 minutes of this. And so I think I have this posted in Teams, but I'm just going to double check here. Just going to double check. Almost. Just got to hit send. Okay. So online people, the link and the questions are posted in Microsoft Teams. So maybe what I'll do is online people, I'll turn you loose now, watch the first 10 minutes, and then we'll talk about it first thing tomorrow, okay? So as I say, I'll turn you loose here, watch the first 10 minutes, the link and the questions are in Microsoft Teams as usual. Okay, so we'll see you online, guys, tomorrow.